welcome everybody to the Park and Recreation Commission meeting here on Tuesday, August 17th, here at the Carson City Community Center in the Robert Bob Crow Boardroom. So, first off, could we get a roll call?
Chairperson Meyer.
Here.
Vice Chair Cartwright. Here. Commissioner Schutte.
Here.
Commissioner Whitefield.
Here.
Commissioner Caldwell. Here. Commissioner Wilkie McCulloch.
I see her icon.
Commissioner Kiever. Here. A quorum is present.
Thank you. So to start off here with item number 3, is there any public out there that would like to comment on anything that is relevant to Parks and Recreation? Okay, so moving to number 4.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. We had a public comment submitted online from Lynn Zong, and I'm just going to read it so that way everybody has comments. This is about the dog use item.
Thank you.
I'm a resident in Carson City, a dog lover, and a consumer of the wonderful drinking water supplied by Carson City. Sorry I cannot attend the meeting. She provided these comments, just so you know, to the Open Space Advisory Committee last night as well. I strongly urge the Open Space Advisory Committee and the Parks and Recreation Commission to not allow dogs in our watersheds that provide source water for our community. She provides a link to the map on the CSWPP website, and it talks about looking at watershed 1 and 2. While the source water protection watershed areas are quite large, as a minimum, the watershed upstream of our intake structure at North Kings Canyon should be off limits to dogs. Carson City is expending a considerable effort in keeping fecal matter out of the North Kings Canyon watershed, and requesting that no dogs are allowed in that area is a small request considering the vast open spaces where dogs are allowed and where fecal matter would not be a big impact to our sources of drinking water. Other communities, such as Salt Lake City, have their vast watersheds that are sources of the drinking water off limits to dogs. While this is not popular, it is a very good protection of their drinking water sources and helps their citizenry to think about where their drinking water comes from. I drink Carson City tap water. When my friends visit, they often say how good our water tastes. I'd like to keep it that way. Thank you. So that was from Lynn Zong.
Thank you very much. Why, of course, we're not moving on yet, so you go right ahead.
Hi, C.K. Bailey, Carson City, Nevada. I don't want Bailey Pond to be a dog park. There's a dog park just west of the Bailey Pond area. The reason for this is that any kind of urine from animals, from dogs especially, contain nitrates. And these nitrates make their way to the water, which is detrimental to the fish and the fishery. That is why there's a sign right now that says no dogs. However, there have been just about every time I've been there, somebody does show up with a dog. When they're on a leash, it doesn't bother me too much. And those people that are taking care of those dogs are tending to them and take them further away from the pond and try not to let the nitrates enter the pond. But then there are those that just think that it's willy-nilly. There's no leashes. Dogs are peeing everywhere. It's a detriment to the fishery. And I can bring in biologists from Nevada Department of Wildlife that'll say that is true. So there's my comment. I would not like to see dogs unleashed or leashed actually at Bailey Pond. Thank you.
Thank you, CK. Is there any other comment? Anybody else out there that want to make a comment regarding anything on the agenda tonight?
There are no callers on the line at this time.
Okay. All right, so we can move to number 4 on the agenda, which is approval of the minutes. Has everybody looked at the minutes that were also revised there a little bit? Yes. Great. Does anybody see any changes that they would like to have in those minutes? Okay, so I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes for the Joint Park and Recreation Commission meeting and Open Space Advisory Committee meeting on 6/21/2021. Yeah,
And I second it.
thank you, Lisa. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right on. We're moving right along. Thank you. Moving right along. So we have Mr. Dan Arp here for discussion only on the program of the month. And we're going to talk about some Halloween kind of stuff. So you're on your way, Dan. Bonanza. Boo.
Perfect. It's August. Isn't everybody already getting their Halloween decorations out, right?
Exactly. I like your shirt. You
They're in
blend
this.
in with
Yeah,
the theme.
That was
Right.
definitely intentional.
That's right.
very autumn looking shirt.
I know.
All right. So for the record, Dan Arp, Recreation Superintendent. We're just going to talk about, for the program of the month, one of the special events that we've been doing now going into it'll be our 5th annual this year. We started this one my first year here. But just kind of in summary, try to make it so you guys couldn't read that nice and small. So 2017 was the inaugural year of Bonanza. It was just kind of came to our attention as we were talking to some vendors. I think it was mostly Dare, looking at events that we were offering and where they could participate. And we realized we didn't really have any events related to any holiday in the Parks and Recreation system. So we started thinking about what things we could do. And so we came up with this idea of doing Bonanza, which is basically just a safe trick-or-treating event indoors here at the community center. And the library already had a event where they do basically like a costume contest and some crafts and things. And so we just kind of reached out to the library, asked if we could partner with them in doing an event and kind of adding on to theirs that they already had in place, where we would do the trick-or-treating here, and then we'd figure out a safe way for them to cross Roop Street over to the library, and then they could do the costume contest and arts and crafts and other activities that they had over at the library. So that's kind of how the event got started. So what we decided to do was just reach out to local businesses and organizations and see if any of them would be willing to set up a pop-up tent inside the gym and decorate it and pass out candy to kids that go trick-or-treating. That's basically, it's a very simple event, but that's basically what it is. So in 2017, our first year, we had about 41 businesses and organizations respond, which we're pretty happy with for our first year. And we anticipated that we had, about 1,000 to 1,500 participants total that came. It was pretty busy, but we definitely had some slow times here and there. That was probably the last year that we had some slow periods. 2018, we started adding things. So we added a haunted house that was put on by the Youth Theater Carson City, just in the room, the Ponderosa room break off from the gym. They turned that whole thing into a haunted house. We started doing outdoor activities, so we had like carnival games and things like that, and food trucks. And we had 43 vendors that signed up that year. Growth of about 1,500 to 2,000 participants. Oh, and we started doing the best booth contest. So we got the businesses and organizations to start competing against each other a little bit, and we have a trophy for the best decorated booth. And that has spiraled into, even though it's probably like a $30, probably not even that much. I think it's donated actually, but probably like a value of like a $20 trophy. Apparently that's brought out the competition amongst the businesses and vendors. And so 2018, between 2017 and 18, we saw a significant, I don't want to say improvement because we're happy with whatever they did, but more involvement in the decorations that the vendors put together. By 2019, it was like full blown, like pretty impressive what they could throw together in a 10 by 10 space in a couple hours that they have to set up. So 2019 was crazy. So we maxed out the gym. We had 53 vendors. That was by following fire codes. That was like the absolute most I could fit in the gym configuration that I could think of. So pretty much maxed out right there at 53. So we were full. We anticipated about 1,500 kids that came to the event, plus their families. So at least 3,000 people that probably came in that 3-hour period. It was shoulder to shoulder, wall to wall line of people for the entire 3 hours, which is pretty awesome. It was really cold outside, so then we had to move some of the carnival games indoors, which is always a risk for doing an event at the end of October. And then 2020 was COVID, so we had to get creative. We didn't want to see the event go because as we were approaching into October, I think almost every other city event that normally happens between August, September, and October had been canceled. So we wanted to figure out a way to have something. And so we kept it going, but we did it as a drive-through event out at Centennial Sports Complex. So we still had the same vendors come out, decorate the booths, just the same, except for it was a drive-through. We could only have 36 vendors because that was the maximum that we could allow with the spacing, because we were trying to, for cars to get through, we had to create like 30 feet of space in between booths so that hopefully kept the traffic moving somewhat. So yeah, and at that event we had, it was hard to judge. We had about 530 vehicles that came through. If we're averaging 3 per vehicle, you're looking at 1,500, 2,000 people that came through for that event. That basically summarizes most of it, and there's have lots of nice little pictures. So this is the photo contest the costume contest that the library puts on. And our best booth contests. Like I showed you, they turned the whole 10 by 10 space into a jail that they threw together in like 2 hours. It was pretty impressive so they got the trophy that year, and pretty involved. And so it's really festive. It's really fun to see how like the businesses and the organizations love it, passing out the candy. That was Big Blue Dental. And then at the last year was All Creatures Mobile Vet. They won the prize last year. So we do want to have a big shout out to Southwest Gas. They've been our title sponsor for the event from year one, and they've stayed loyal to the event, sponsoring it all 5 years, including this year. So they're the title sponsor. And then once we started doing the outdoor carnival portion of it, or / indoor, depending on the weather, Carson City Toyota has sponsored the carnival portion of it. And over the 4 years, we don't always get the same vendors. We have a lot of repeats, but we've had over 100 different vendors or businesses and organizations that have passed out candy at the event over the past 4 years. Like I said, in 2020, we did the drive-through. Just want to show some pictures. Luckily, we had really nice weather. That may not always be the case, so that's why our goal is to try and do it indoors. But we invited families that were driving through to decorate their vehicles. So you can see that the families got involved. So it wasn't just the businesses that decorated their booths, but then people had all sorts of decorations on their cars, which was pretty fun. And we actually had to extend the event by about an hour just because we weren't done with the line of traffic that was trying to get through. And the businesses and organizations were all happy to stick it out and keep passing out candy as long as they had candy. Some of them started to run out towards the end. And then this year, our goal is to return it back to be indoors here at the community center. Obviously, we'll just have to play that by ear depending on what happens with COVID, if things change, and just making sure we're following whatever the state mandates are at the time. But it's going to be Thursday, October 28th. We've moved the date around a bit over the years, but we've really settled on that Thursday leading into Nevada Day. We really like it because we feel like we get great participation because the kids don't have school the next day. And the businesses can party all they want, passing out candy.
So you're saying the day before the parade day?
So this is Thursday, the observed holiday being Friday, so not a school day, and then the parade Saturday. So we've just opened up registration, so we're currently recruiting vendors. So if anybody who would like to participate, send them my way. We'd be happy to get them signed up. But I anticipate, assuming we could do it indoors, that we'll be full again at the whole 53. And if we get more, we hope to try and accommodate everybody. We just have to figure out where we're going to put them. And then just some fun photos so it kind of shows you the wall of traffic. Some fun costumes that we see that bottom right corners, some of the games that we put out in the parking lot. We closed this parking lot right behind you. We closed that whole thing off, and that's where we put food trucks and carnival games when the weather's nice. And then the first year, the youth theater did the whole Thriller dance, so that's what that photo is down there. But that is it. Any questions about Bonanza?
Go ahead, Leanne. Yeah. I got to show mine. Okay.
Thank you. I was just wondering if the Parks and Rec Department, do we have a booth?
We do.
All right. Do you need volunteers to help staff it?
We usually do.
Okay. I will throw
We
in
will not
the-
say no to that for sure.
Okay. Cool. That was it.
Hi there. I want to say out of all the events that the city sponsors, the Park and Rec Department, this is the one that I received the most requests about. Are they going to do it again? And last year, when you guys came up with Bonanza, you could just hear a collective sigh of relief. And I want to thank you guys for thinking outside the box and still allowing the kids to have some sort of Halloween celebration last year. I really appreciate it, and I know a lot of parents appreciated it as well. And again, if you need a volunteer, let me know.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So, and I would also volunteer at that, so I just have to be reminded.
All right. Sounds like we got a full booth.
There you go. And then we can have the best costume contest among the commissioners. What do you think? We'll learn about that towards the end of this meeting, so.
Costumes would impede on the open meeting law.
Yeah, possibly. All right. So thank you very much, Stan. This sounds exciting, and can't wait to see it all come together again. And hopefully it goes the way you want it to go.
Thank you. Yes, always.
But it looks like you're versatile. So
Yep.
okay. So next on the agenda is item number 6, and that is regarding the Nevada Open Meeting Law, Ethics in Government in Carson City, and Ben is going to take that on. So go ahead, Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ben Johnson, Senior Deputy District Attorney for the record. So this is a refresher course for those of you who have already been on the board and may have gone through it before. And for those that are new, this is an introduction to the open meeting law and the ethics and government provisions and how they apply to this body. So our office actually produced a video that we're going to watch first about the open meeting law. And then I will summarize a few points from the video that you should particularly pay attention to, and then we'll go briefly over some of the ethics provisions and how those apply regarding abstentions and things like that. So we'll watch the video first, and then we'll go through the presentation, and if anyone has questions along the way, feel free to let me know.
Compliant with both statutory and common. Welcome to this brief overview of the Nevada Open Meeting Law. If you're watching this because you're an elected or appointed official serving in Carson City, this presentation will provide you with some of the basic legal rules that you should know in order to conduct your public meetings in a way that's compliant with both statutory and common law requirements. If, on the other hand, you're watching as a citizen who simply wants to learn more about the open meeting law, welcome. You've come to the right place. Today, we'll be talking about certain requirements that were established by the Nevada legislature to ensure transparency in how public meetings are conducted, and which guide a public official when that official is participating in a public meeting. Please keep in mind, though, that there is a lot, both in statute and in case law, that drive the open meeting law. Although we won't have enough time to go over every single requirement, I'll do my best to go over some of the most important parts. So, what exactly is the open meeting law in Nevada? The open meeting law, NRS 241.010 to 241.040. Those are the statutory provisions codified in Nevada revised statutes, which require certain meetings to be open to the public and conducted in a certain way. That includes, for example, meetings of the Carson City Board of Supervisors, the Redevelopment Authority, the Planning Commission, and many, many other boards, committees, and commissions that operate as a public body in Carson City whether created by statute, city ordinance, or the Board of Supervisors under authority of state law or the city charter. The legislature had a certain purpose in mind when enacting the open meeting law provisions. In enacting this chapter, the legislature finds and declares that all public bodies exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business. It is the intent of the law that their actions be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted openly. These are the foundations of the Nevada open meeting law. There has to be a public body. There has to be a meeting. Before the meeting, there has to be a notice, and there also has to be an agenda that shows the public what is going to be presented before the public body. Finally, after adjournment of the agenda, there must be a preparation of minutes in a timely fashion. The open meeting law is made up of 5 main parts. First, it only applies to public bodies. A public body is any administrative, advisory, executive, or legislative body of the state or a local government consisting of at least 2 persons which expends or disperses or is supported in whole or in part by tax revenue, or which advises or makes recommendations to any entity which expends or disperses or is supported in whole or in part by tax revenue, including, but not limited to, any board, commission, committee, subcommittee, or other subsidiary thereof. Wow, I know that's a mouthful, but please stay with me. The open meeting law does not apply to meetings of non-governmental entities, and even some governmental entities are expressly exempt from the open meeting law provisions. For example, the open meeting law does not apply to the Nevada legislature, most judicial proceedings, certain meetings of the State Board of Parole Commissioners, and other meetings where state law specifically provides that the open meeting law does not apply. But then, what is a meeting exactly? A meeting is a gathering of members of a public body at which a quorum is present, whether in person or by means of electronic communication, to deliberate toward a decision or to take action on any matter over which the public body has supervision, control, jurisdiction, or advisory power. This includes any series of gatherings of members of a public body at which less than a quorum is present, whether in person, by means of electronic communication, at any individual gathering. The members of the public body attending one or more of the gatherings collectively constitute a quorum, and the series of gatherings was held with a specific intent to avoid the requirements of the open meeting law. So, we've heard a lot of different key terms here. Let's think about each one. What's a quorum? A quorum is a simple majority of the membership of the public body or another proportion established by law. If, for example, there are only 2 members, then there can't be a meeting for purposes of the open meeting law because there's no quorum. Also, for there to be a meeting, there must be at least 2 members on the public body. For example, there are certain administrative meetings that are conducted by 1 hearing officer. Under those circumstances, there is no quorum of 1 and the open meeting law would not apply. If all 5 members of the Board of Supervisors gathered for no purpose other than to discuss whether there really are UFOs and aliens on Mars, that wouldn't constitute a meeting. That would be subject to the open meeting law because remember, the meeting has to do with a matter over which the board has supervision, control, jurisdiction, or advisory power. Now, let's talk about what it means for a public body to act or deliberate. Action. That's a decision made by a majority of the members present during a meeting of the public body, or a commitment or promise made by a majority of the members present during a meeting of the public body. Deliberation. That means to collectively to examine, weigh, and reflect upon the reasons for or against the action. That term includes, without limitation, the collective discussion or exchange of facts preliminary to the ultimate decision. Social functions are also not subject to the open meeting law so long as there is no deliberation over matters. Attorney conferences are also not subject to the open meeting law. These conferences fall outside the meaning of meeting for purposes of the open meeting law and are exempt even if the members of the public body are deliberating towards a decision for existing or potential litigation. But there can be no action taken which, if you'll recall, is the making of a decision, a promise, or commitment, or coming to a consensus. Let's talk for a moment about electronic communications. In addition to in-person meetings, members of a public body may also participate and vote on matters during a public meeting electronically, meaning by telephone or video conferencing. However, if a member is allowed to be present telephonically or through video conferencing, the public must be able to hear or observe what is happening. Another important thing to remember about electronic communications is that they must not be used to circumvent the spirit or the letter of the open meeting law. The entire purpose of the open meeting law is to facilitate transparency in government by requiring actions and deliberations to be taken and conducted openly, so that the public always has an opportunity to know what the government is doing. Members of a public body must exercise great care in avoiding what's known as a walking quorum, which can more easily happen inadvertently through the use of an electronic device such as a cell phone or computer. Let's take a look at this scenario.
Hello? Hey there, it's me, Adam. I'm going to vote yes in that land issue tomorrow. How about you?
Great, I'm going to vote yes too. I'll reach out to Tony, okay?
Perfect. What's up, Debbie?
Hey, Tony, I just spoke with Adam, and we're both going to vote yes on that land issue tomorrow. We want to know if you're on board.
Okay, cool. No need to talk with Bert or Harry, because that's 3 votes for us. Brilliant.
In that scenario, we had a walking quorum that was made possible by a series of telephone calls, which would violate the open meeting law. But it doesn't just have to be phone calls. The same violation could happen with, for example, fax or email communications. The lesson here is to always be mindful of serial communications between members of the public body. If you're a member of a public body and you receive an email about a topic that falls under the jurisdiction of the body that you're serving on, always remember to check who's all on the email. Check the recipient list. Check the blind copy list. Remember that the open meeting law also applies before and after a meeting, so members of a public body must also avoid talking about matters within the jurisdiction of the public body before a meeting convenes and after a meeting adjourns, or during recess, because those discussions could easily turn into a deliberation. The practice pointer here is to confine those types of discussions to discussions on the record. The open meeting law doesn't apply to meetings among staff. So for example, if Carson City employees gathered to discuss an item that will be appearing on a future agenda as an item for discussion or action, that meeting would not be subject to the open meeting law provisions. Additionally, private meetings between staff and a non-quorum of public body members would not violate the open meeting law. All right, let's talk about a few notice requirements now. Notice must be given at least 3 working days before the meeting. Notice must include the time, place, and location of the meeting, and various other information. The agenda must consist of a clear and complete statement of the topics to be considered. Discussion, deliberation, and action must stick to the agenda. Remember, this is part of the public's right to know. Items on which action may be taken must be denoted as being for possible action. Otherwise, the board, committee, or commission may not take action on that agenda item. And lastly, but not least, there must, at a minimum, be 2 periods for public comment. Certain requirements must be met to satisfy the public's right to know. Notice of a meeting, which is oftentimes the agenda itself, must be posted at least 3 working days in advance of the meeting. Of course, it must also list the date, time, and place of the meeting, and it must be posted in certain other locations as required by statute. These requirements, including requirements related to how an agenda title should be worded, are all set forth in the provisions of NRS 241.020. For Carson City public body notices and agendas, members of public bodies can rely on the assistance of staff and the district attorney's office to ensure that posting requirements and other legal requirements relating to the content of an agenda are all satisfied. Public comment is something, however, that the members of a public body need to give special attention to. At a minimum, public comment must be taken at the beginning of the meeting before any items on which action may be taken are heard, and again before the adjournment of the meeting, or after each item on the agenda on which action may be taken is discussed by the public body, but before the public body takes action on the item. A public body may impose certain restrictions on public comment. but those restrictions must be stated clearly on the agenda. Those restrictions must also be content neutral. Comments that are unduly repetitious, slanderous, or irrelevant to the public body may be limited as well. Reasonable rules of decorum may be imposed, and disruptive behavior may be prohibited. Reasonable time restrictions may also be imposed, but that must be uniformly imposed on all speakers. Let's consider this next scenario.
Mr. Chairman, I have come to you today to express my concern about an issue of great importance in this community, and that is alien abduction. It's happening right now in this here community. Right now.
Is this the type of public comment that must be allowed? Well, the answer is no. Unless this public body was formed to have some type of authority over UFO-related matters, this public comment is irrelevant to the public body. The manner in which the comment is given is also disruptive, and so the chair of the public body may restrict the comment.
I cast ye out. Good morning, honorable members of the committee. I am here in opposition to this agenda item. I know you have been working on this item for a very long time, but I just do not think it is a good idea.
Are you kidding me? Ah! You know this is my measure, right? You come in here, if you don't understand how good and right this is, then you're too stupid to even be heard. Just go sit back down for crying out loud. Jeez.
Was that restriction permitted under the open meeting law? The answer again is no. The person speaking was not disruptive in any way, had not exceeded any time limit, and was speaking on a matter under the jurisdiction of the public body. He was cut off because the chair simply did not like his perspective, and that's probably viewpoint discrimination, which would be unlawful. Now, here are some other points to remember about public comment periods. During public comment, members of the public body are not required to respond to the public comment. However, members are not prohibited from responding to public comment. Public comment, nonetheless, should be dedicated as time to the public, and therefore, members ought to refrain from excessive comments themselves. Meeting materials that must be provided to the public at no charge include a copy of the agenda itself, any proposed ordinance or regulation that will be discussed at the meeting, any other supporting material provided to the public except for materials that are confidential or proprietary information pertaining to the closed portion of a meeting or otherwise declared confidential by law. At least one copy of the agenda, any ordinance or resolution, and supporting material must be made available to the public at the meeting. Minutes must be kept of each meeting, including the date, time, and the place of the meeting. The minutes must reflect attendance of public body members, and it has to indicate who was present and who was absent. Minutes must also include substance of all matters proposed, discussed, or decided. And they must include substantive remarks made by the public. Minutes must be approved by the public body within 45 days after the meeting or at the next meeting, whichever is later. Finally, minutes are considered public records, and either minutes or an audio recording must be made available for inspection by the public within 30 working days after adjournment. We've now gone over some of the most fundamental aspects of the Nevada open meeting law. So what happens if there's a violation? The Office of the Attorney General has primary jurisdiction to investigate violations of and enforce compliance with the open meeting law. If a violation is found to have occurred, any action taken in violation of law is void. Violations can also result in misdemeanor charges, as well as a $500 civil penalty for each violation. Different sources of information that you may also find helpful include case law that can be found in the annotations to NRS Chapter 241. NRS is available on the Nevada Legislature's website, but annotations to case law are not. Annotations can be viewed by using legal research programs or by visiting your local law library, including the Nevada Supreme Court Library. You can also view and download a copy of the Nevada Open Meeting Law Manual and official legal opinions of the Nevada Attorney General's Office, which can be found on the Attorney General website. Hopefully, this brief presentation has been helpful to you. If you're an elected or appointed member of a public body in Carson City and you have additional questions that require a more detailed analysis of the open meeting law, as well as any questions related to your voting and abstention requirements under ethics laws, please do not hesitate to contact the District Attorney's Office. Thanks for watching.
Okay, so I know that was a lot to digest, so I'm just going to hit and reemphasize just a couple points that you heard. So obviously, this is a public body, and a meeting occurs when a quorum is present. So a quorum is a simple majority. So when 4 of you are here, we can have a meeting. If we have less than a quorum, we can't have a meeting under the open meeting law. And so that's why sometimes if we don't have enough members who show up, we have to cancel the meeting, because otherwise any action that you take is void. So, I'm here during the meetings to help make sure that everything that's discussed and goes on is, in compliance with the open meeting law. It's really where I'm not present. Obviously, when you're discussing things amongst yourselves or you're emailing or texting, that's kind of where you really want to be careful. As the video said, if one of you reaches out to somebody else and that person reaches out to somebody else, and if 4 of you are, communicating with each other, even if it's just one-on-one, pretty soon you have a serial communication where you're talking about something that's under the jurisdiction of this commission and something that might come before you or is coming before you, and that's a violation of the open meeting law. So just be really careful in your communications, and this includes like when the parks director or anyone else sends out an email to everyone, instead of hitting reply all, you really should just reply to the, staff. You can communicate with staff and then we can disseminate information if needed, rather than you trying to communicate with everyone else. So just be aware of that. And then there was the issue, or the question about social functions. So if all of you wanted to go and attend Bonanza, that's perfectly fine, as long as you don't group together and start talking about dog leash policies or something like that. I mean, 1, that doesn't sound very fun to do when there's an event going on, but 2, that would be a violation of the open meeting law. So, just be aware of that when, you go to anything really. If you were all going to go attend a play in the theater, and there's during intermission, you just don't want to talk about anything that would come within the jurisdiction or, anything in this body. You're free to discuss anything else. You just want to avoid that. So, it doesn't apply to social functions, but you just want to be careful that you don't stray into conversations on topics that might be discussed by the board. And obviously, as the video said, the reason for that is because we're trying to be transparent. The public is entitled to hear your deliberations. All of your thoughts are really important. And we want to make sure that the public is able to hear that, so that they can understand why decisions are being made in the way that they are. During public comment, this is also another area where we want to be careful. A lot of the times members of the public will come and they'll have questions. As the meeting said, it's not prohibited for board members to respond. But often what we try to encourage instead is that, they communicate with staff afterwards rather than answering questions during it, because that can tend to lead to discussion that's something that's not on the agenda. And as the meeting said, we're supposed to follow an agenda that's posted that has, the topics of what's going to be discussed. And if somebody brings up something that's not on the agenda during public comment, we start commenting on it or discussing it, all of a sudden it becomes deliberation, and then you're in violation of the open meeting law. So just be careful of that. I'm not suggesting you can't respond, but it really should be a chance for the public to make comment and not to get into any kind of in-depth discussion. So sometimes you'll notice me chiming in during public comment if we're getting a little bit too in-depth of a discussion, and I'll recommend that maybe we agendize something for a future meeting. So it's, as I said, certainly not intended to discourage the public from answering or asking questions, but it's probably better to direct them to staff to get those answers. One thing that the video didn't cover is how the ethics and government provisions apply to this body. So we do follow NRS Chapter 281A, that's the Ethics in Government Statutes. And basically what that requires is that if any of the members have a conflict of interest regarding anything that's going to be discussed or voted on by the board, you're required to make a disclosure and abstain if it would affect a reasonable person's ability to remain neutral. And so what that means is that if you have any kind of personal commitment to anyone that might appear before the board or is involved with one of the action items, for example, if your company comes before the board because they're bidding on a contract, or they're involved in a project, or you've received a gift or a loan from that person. This also includes family members. So if your spouse, anyone within the third degree of consanguinity, and what that basically means is that your children, your parents, your brothers or sisters, your aunts and uncles, your grandparents or great-grandparents, people that are within that proximity to you in your family, you have an obligation to disclose that relationship. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to abstain, which means that you're not going to take action, you're not going to participate in the vote. But we always want to err on the side of disclosure when at all possible. So what I'd ask is that when you get the agenda, take a look at it and see what is coming up. It's not often that a board like this would have that many conflicts, but certainly, if we're doing something where you're reviewing, if we're discussing like a development and how it impacts parks or something along those lines, and the developer, or the contractors, you want to contact me so that we can discuss it. If you ever have a question about whether or not something is a conflict, and I can help you draft a disclosure statement that you would read into the record at the beginning of that item in order to make that public. And then we can also talk about whether or not you need to abstain from voting, and that just simply means that you don't take part in the action item. The statute is pretty specific about when you need to abstain, and it's only when it's very absolutely clear that there is a conflict. So chances are that you can participate, but again, we do want that disclosure just to make sure that we're being above board all the way and just really playing into that transparency that the open meeting law and the ethics and government provisions are all about. And basically, the standard is whether or not a reasonable person in your position, an objective or reasonable person in your position, would have their judgment impacted by that relationship. So that's essentially what the open meeting law and ethics and government provisions mean as far as this body. If you ever have any questions now, certainly I'm happy to answer them. Or in the future, if you want a refresher or you just aren't sure about something, I'm always available by phone or email. So feel free to reach out to me. And if you need my contact information, certainly reach out to Jen and I can get in touch with you.
Does anybody have any questions for Ben on this? Great. Well, thank you very much for that presentation. That was a lot of fun to watch the video. So moving on, we're going to go over to Jennifer, and Jennifer's going to talk to us about an anniversary celebration for the quality of life. I almost called it question 18, which is also something it's called on occasion, the quality of life. So go ahead, Jen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. This November marks the 25th anniversary of the Quality of Life Initiative, and it was a voter-approved sales tax 1/4% initiative that was approved by the voters. And it's unique in the state of Nevada. We're the only county that has such a tax, and it's dedicated to parks, trails, and open space. I gave you a copy of that ballot question in your packet so you could look back and kind of think about all the facilities that have really benefited from this fund. And it continues to fund all of these things today, which is really wonderful. It doesn't pay for our entire department's budget by any means, but it is a significant support to make sure that we're able to provide quality maintenance of our facilities and have, recreation opportunities for the public. One, very great example is the Multipurpose Athletic Center. That building was entirely funded through the Quality of Life Fund. It was bonded off of that money, and it's paid over year, and we're still paying for that building, but it's entirely funded by the Quality of Life Initiative. So that's just one of many examples. A lot of the equipment, I gave you some late material that we'll really talk about later, but a lot of the equipment that we're replacing and purchasing, our rolling stock for our maintenance fleet, is funded from the Quality of Life Fund. A lot of our open space acquisitions have been funded that way. But another thing that we've also done is we've really leveraged those funds, any opportunity that we can. We try to apply for grants and other opportunities to try to leverage what money we do have and get the most we can for that funding. So the staff wanted to take an opportunity to celebrate this fund and what it's done for the community, so we could also educate the public, because there's a lot of new people into Carson City that don't even know that when they're going, shopping, that their sales tax is really helping our parks, trails, and open space. So we want to take the opportunity to educate the public about it and, just celebrate a lot of these facilities and provide some great recreation opportunities at the same time. So we're going to have a month-long celebration in November for quality of life. We're going to kick it off in October on the 29th. Actually, I guess our real kickoff could be Bonanza, to be honest, because it's the 28th. I was just thinking tonight, maybe that's the true kickoff. But on the 29th, we're going to have a kickoff event, music, food, cowboy poetry at Silver Saddle Ranch. A lot of these are real conceptual ideas. I don't have hard times or anything like that. This is still a little bit tentative right now. But we're going to try to dial everything in by the end of this next week or two so we can get it in the activity guide. On the 30th, the Nevada Day Parade, obviously one of our greatest celebrations. The city is going to have a float with employees in the parade. We're going to try to have a quality of life component in that. Muscle Power does a trash mob post Nevada Day now, so that's another great initiative of the Quality of Life. It talks about beautification and cleanup efforts and trying to have some pride in the community. On November 4th, we're going to have a quality of life report at the Board of Supervisors and a proclamation declaring November like a quality of life month, that kind of concept. But the report's really going to be, that big education component, and we'll have some facts about how much we've leveraged these funds and what they've built and all that they've contributed through those last 25 years. November 6th, we'll have a dodgeball tournament at the MAC. That's likely going to be a fundraiser for the Parks Foundation. A couple of these events, we're going to try to raise some money for our scholarship fund for youth. There'll also be a Fall Colors bike ride that day. On the 20th, we'll have a Junior Ranger program and some kind of pool event, pool carnival, something at the aquatic facility. The aquatic facility really benefits from this fund. Aquatic facility is really hard because a lot of grant sources don't really fund that. So the support from the Quality of Life Fund is super important to make sure that facility is open and safe. The 21st, a Junior Ranger program. And then we're also talking about a disc golf tournament, a beginner's pickleball clinic, which Dave Whitefield's on the line. He's going to help work with the staff on that at the MAC. We've reached out to the Boys and Girls Club. They receive $120,000 annually from this fund. That was in the voter approved bond. It's unrestricted. It can go toward anything that they need. So I really want them to also participate in telling their story and what that money has meant, to local youth in the community. We're also talking to Endo about doing some archery and shooting sports activities at the rifle range or either at our archery facility, or if it's too cold, maybe we move it indoors at Fuji Exhibit Hall. And then last night at the Open Space Advisory Committee, they really wanted a robust like PR initiative. They really want us to reach out to a lot of, not only like Nevada, Carson Now and the Nevada Appeal, but reaching out to the TV stations. And Dave Navarro had a great idea about a video. And so I think we're really going to try to work on a marketing campaign as well to try to educate the public about this and really celebrate all that it's done for the community. So that's kind of where we're at now. Any other, ideas or questions that you might have, let us know. It's still a work in progress, but we'll keep you updated, as we finalize all the plans.
Thank you, Jen. I think you should use the green and white like we did before, when we put it out in 96, the question 18, green and white and all, just an idea. All the signs were all over the neighborhoods and stuff like that. So anyhow, so does anybody have any questions or comments about the question 18? I mean, quality of life, I'm sorry. Lisa?
I just have a comment. I just so appreciate this, and I think it's a wonderful idea. I think sometimes we forget the importance of the why behind an initiative, and something like this, the quality of life, and what it has done, and how it really has just brought so many wonderful opportunities for Carson City, like you were saying, leveraging funds, making great opportunities available to youth and all of us. So kudos and super exciting.
On some of this late material, you can see that we'll talk about later in the meeting. There's so many things that are being funded right now by the quality of life right there. So that's the component that a lot of people don't understand was put into this question was not only a bonding ability to build the facilities, but money set aside to maintain the facilities. And that was paramount in what we have going here for sure. So Jennifer, I have a quick question. As far as this being 25 years old, what was the term on a lot of those bonds issues, and have we paid any of those off?
Well, there still is one right now for the multipurpose athletic centers we talked about. That'll be paid off in 2030.
Okay, so like the Edmonds Field and the aquatic facility, all those are paid off?
All those are paid off.
Isn't that fantastic? Just fantastic. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on, we're going to stay over there with Jennifer, and she's going to talk about recommendations to the staff concerning dog use policy or ordinance for the Carson City parks and open space areas. So take it away, Jen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. So this is just continuing our conversation that we've been having with the Open Space Advisory Committee. We conducted that community survey, received more respondents in this survey than any other survey that the city has conducted. So it just really shows you how passionate people are about this. Whether they have dogs or not, everybody's got an opinion for sure. And we're really lucky that people were able to share that. And we had, a great turnout last meeting as well, sharing their comments. I do want to thank Mark Kimbrough. He's on the Open Space Advisory Committee. A lot of your attachments are really due to his hard work. He took that survey information and kind of manipulated it into some graphs and some more visual representation. So you have that if you need to refer back to it, so you can try to remember what were people saying about that. But definitely the attachment one we'll be really talking about tonight, but attachments 2 and 3 will really help kind of guide you as you're starting to develop these policy statements as we move forward. And then that last one is, just really taking those comments that people took the time to write, and really, there's a lot of them, and I know it's a lot to digest. And obviously, this is just a discussion item. There's no action tonight. This is just to continue that discussion and about this, and we may have, several more meetings where we continue to kind of work through this. And I'd rather us take our time and do it right and make sure we hear everybody and address things and not rush it. But we definitely plan to keep this going, and at minimum, at the joint meeting again in December with the Open Space Advisory Committee. They met last night. Dave and I were both there, and it was a really good conversation. They definitely are focused on discussions of the river corridor, environmental areas, nesting habitat, sheep grazing. Those were the primary items that we discussed last night. Conflicts with wildlife. So to kind of complement that, I'd like to talk about things that they didn't talk about here tonight, the more active areas. We did talk about trails last night. There's trails that go through our parks. They were very concerned about the parks that the tributaries to our Carson River go through. So for example, Mills Park has a creek that runs through it. That's a tributary to the Carson River. Also, there's a creek that goes through Long Ranch Park. And there was a very big discussion about water quality and the impacts of dog use to those water sources. And then you heard Lynn Zong and her comments about source water protection. And in particular, her comments were related to the water, sorry, I'm fogging up my glasses, the waterfall trail. And that goes right into the Quill water treatment. That trail is right above the city's facility. So there's a lot of concern about feces in there. We don't bring the sheep on that side anymore because we don't want that downstream impact to the water. So that was the primary focus of the Open Space Advisory Committee last night, and it was really, really good discussion. I do want to take your attention to attachment 1, and hopefully that can kind of guide our discussion tonight, and we can go wherever you guys are comfortable with. But I tried to come up with some discussion topics to get us to focus on policy statements. I know you wanted a draft policy, but when staff started working on it, it gets really complicated. This sounds like it's a simple thing to do, but it's really not. And especially since people are so emotional, I just wanted to try to extrapolate things, talk about policy statements. How do you feel about that wording? Does that work for you guys? And kind of go from there. One thing that we've kind of noted as we've gone through this already is we probably need to think about in the policy authorizing the director for exceptions. There might be exceptions to certain things that, not everything is black and white. So I'm going to give you an example. If you look at item 3 on attachment 1, it says dogs are prohibited except service animals at certain specialty parks, buildings, or facilities. So for example, right now, we don't allow dogs at Mills Park. However, I have authorized a couple activities within Mills Park that do have dogs. One example is the Cassie Pooch Plunge, which is the last day of the outdoor pool. Great awareness for Cassie and all that Cassie does for our community, encouraging people to adopt, to spay or neuter, all those things that the Nevada Humane Society and Cassie promote. And we do allow that activity, obviously, the last door, the outdoor pool. Also, we had a movie in the park a couple weeks ago. It was Homeward Bound. So definitely that theme. And then Nevada Humane Society had an adoption event that we authorized in conjunction with that. So there may be times where we may, allow that type of use, maybe where typical, the park might not typically have, dog use in that park. So that's just an example of some wording we might want to consider as we move forward in the policy. So we wrote some policy statements. I have met with the Nevada Humane Society. I shared all of our survey results with them. They're very excited to participate with us. I've also spoken to Ben about when we go to update the parks and open space ordinances, it might be great to also update the animal ordinances at the same time because there's a lot of crossover. The animal control officers that work for the Nevada Humane Society, they are funded, partially by the city as well, and they're acting as the city's agents, and how they enforce and the rules that and ordinances they're dealing with, our park rangers are as well. So I kind of consider them an extension of our department on that note. And we want to make sure that the wording that's in the animal ordinances and the park ordinances, jive. and that work for our park rangers and our animal control officers should they have to issue a misdemeanor citation. Let's see. So some of the policy statements, and we took some of this from the animal ordinances too, is, obviously if you have a dog at a park or an open space facility, we want to make sure that they're healthy, they're licensed, compliance with the law, and up to date on all vaccinations. So in the animal ordinances, I think it talks about the vaccinations that they should have. So we might want to expand upon that, on what is expected. Dogs are required to be on leash all times except in designated areas. The Humane Society loved this one, and there is not currently a leash law in Carson City. They did stress concern, the biggest issue that they deal with is stray dogs, from what they said. And they would really appreciate a leash law in Carson City, and then identify those areas where it's okay to have your dog off a leash, where it might be a good location, maybe not near a busy road or in a dog park, obviously, or other areas that we discuss as we develop this policy. But they said that a best practice in a city of this size is to have a leash law. And usually it's, definitely a public safety issue. But obviously, I want to make sure we're allowing enough off-leash areas too, to make sure we're providing those opportunities for people. And that's where you guys come in. Where are those areas? Where should they be? So some other areas right now, we talked about special use facilities and sports complexes. A comment that was made last night was Centennial Park. While you probably don't want dogs at the sports field or at the golf course, there is a trailhead there. And a lot of people go and take their dogs to the trailhead, and then they go up on the trail system. And staff has been working with BLM and doing, some trail development in there as well. So making sure that if this, I guess, is the direction that we're going to go, making sure we make it clear where the dogs can go within that one park is an example. So then if you look at number 4, certain areas are designated for off-leash use. Dogs off leash in designated areas must be under voice control of the owner, and the owner must carry one leash for each dog under their control at all times. The following areas are considered dog-friendly and designated for off-leash use. So we just put some examples of what we could put in there. So my question to you is, what areas should be included as a designated area for off-leash use? If it's only certain parks, which ones and why? Right now, we have some parks where dogs are allowed and some parks where dogs are not allowed, and some that are both. There are some, that, like Long Ranch, where leashes are required on half of the park, and then the other half of the park, it's allowed off-leash area. That's also one of the parks that has a creek going through it, that has some environmental concerns. It's surrounded by open space. There's a lot of things happening there. So which areas, I think the easy ones are Fuji and Sonoma Park. They're fenced dog parks. Those are obviously off-leash designated areas. Where else should be off-leash areas?
Jan, what about the park at the end of 5th Street? I know a lot of people take their dogs out there, they're off leash, but there's nesting, there's water, there's other considerations.
Are you talking about Riverview Park or okay. Yeah, so Riverview Park was a hot topic last night. There are off-leash dogs everywhere all the time. There is nesting habitat, there's wetlands, there's a lot going on in there. The discussion last night, to summarize it, and I don't want to discount anything that they said, it was a pretty robust conversation, but they really felt that any significant changes at Riverview Park would be really difficult for the park rangers to enforce. But they did talk about perhaps having leash requirements during nesting season might be a good compromise. When you look at the survey, people were actually in very strong favor for closures or prohibiting dogs during certain times when there's nesting season or, conflicts with wildlife. So people seem very supportive of that. But overall, the consensus last night was that they didn't think that, prohibiting dogs or at all at Riverview in particular would be realistic. So the direction was to follow up with NDOW, Department of Wildlife, to get some more information about the nesting habitat, maybe the buffer areas. What is it really no dogs? Could dogs under control and on a leash during nesting season, reduce those conflicts with wildlife? Getting some expert advice in that area and look at the river corridor as a whole. Are there certain areas maybe we could encourage dogs to be off and enjoying the water, or or some others that might be a greater concern? But we don't want to confuse people. You don't want to say, well, the river corridor, you can go here, here, and here, or could it be something where we could have a map and we could have maybe 2 areas or something like that? So Lindsay Boyer, our open space manager, is going to be following up with the Department of Wildlife about the river corridor in particular and trying to get some more information that might help guide our decisions about that. But that's a great question, about Riverview. At first, I thought you were talking about the state property. There is a dog park there, but that's not the city's, it's state property, and they'll tell you it's not a dog park, but it does have, fenced, and there's turf area, and there's, bags, for dog waste as well. So people use that all the time, but that's not the city's, it's operated by the state. I think also in your packet too, there was a request for, I think it's the last attachment. If you look at attachment 4, since we're on the topic of dog waste stations, Dave put this together, and it has a list of all of the dog waste stations in Carson City, because that was one of the questions we asked in the survey. People want them everywhere and all the time, but I think when they look at the cost, they might change their mind a little bit. We have talked about, I know Commissioner Whitefield has had some great ideas about sponsors and engaging the community and businesses to maybe adopt some of those locations. We're completely open to that, to help fund them. The Downtown Business Association does support a few of those already, which is great. But yeah, you can see the cost, and then beyond, just the labor to keep those filled beyond purchasing the bags it's an arduous task, but an important one.
I have a question about dog waste. Refilling the stations, is that something that a volunteer organization could do?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Hey, Jen, can I add on? Okay. See, for the record, Dave Navarro, Park Operations Superintendent. Currently, if you look at attachment 4, I did put a note. It's kind of in small print, but we do have, I think, let me pull it up real quick. Sorry. We currently have 10 volunteers right now who are replacing the dog waste bags in 25 of those stations that are on the sheet. So yeah, we currently do have that, and we're always reaching out and trying to find more volunteers for that.
Well, if it's not, if you could just let me know which ones are still available, that I think would be a great opportunity for a particular organization that I know that volunteers might be willing to help with that.
Absolutely. I'll have to go back to the office and see which ones that they are, and I can definitely send you that information.
Nice.
And which ones also are available as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Welcome.
Commissioner Kiever?
Oh, I think she's referring to what's called the Mutt Mitt program. And there were flyers all around town at one time. And I know people were jazzed, and then the flyers, they disappeared, and you've got to continually keep people reminded. So maybe we could do something on Facebook or Twitter or something.
We can definitely improve our outreach. That's been part of, our AmeriCorps program, where we've had volunteers and we've had outreach and education coordinators. They only have a year of service, so, some are better than others that we get. And we've had some that have been just tremendous and created flyers and great outreach materials and opportunities. We're working on trying to fill the volunteer coordinator position again, and then get a little bit, better promotion of that. But this is also a great way to advertise, your nonprofit or your business if you want to adopt a station, a trail, an open space, a park, on a bigger scale, and you get signage at that park. And, it's great camaraderie when you have cleanups or you do projects at a park for your business or your nonprofit. It's a great way to just engage in the community and feel good. And it helps us because we have a really significant labor shortage right now. So any help we can get, we completely appreciate. But even just filling a station, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it really does reduce the amount of staff time and the expense.
Dave, could you explain to me how that works as far as the volunteer program? Are those bags sent to those people? Do we drop them off? Do they purchase them themselves?
Yeah, that's a good question. Mr. Chair Meyer, currently, what we have worked out with the volunteers is that we supply the like the dog waste bags, and we have been having the volunteers come to the office, and we've been leaving them like the boxes at our front office, the counter, and they have been coming in. When they run empty, they give us a call, and we say, okay, you can pick them up on this date here, and that's what they've been doing.
Thank you very much. Just was trying to connect the dots in my head, see how it all worked out.
So what, I'm going to keep pushing you back to number 4. So what areas do you think should be designated as off-leash areas besides dog parks that are fenced? Are there certain parks? We heard, numerous residents from Carriage Square. Right now, they don't allow dogs at that park. They want that to continue. Should that continue? What other parks do you think that's appropriate? Should it just be everybody on a leash? What are your thoughts?
Oh, as far as enforcement, I mean, in a park and on a leash, if they're going to be, right? I mean, if in section of the dog parks.
So you're saying that
I'm kind of
all parks should be
I'm
leash
spitballing
required?
here, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as
There's no wrong answer. I mean,
yeah, no,
these are,
as far as if the parks in Carson City all had a leash law, like you said, was common practice for a town our size, and there was designated parks that were off leash, that would be pretty simple for everybody to understand and enforce.
So which
And I'll
parks would be designated off leash?
The dog parks.
Just the 2 dog parks. Okay.
Well, and you said right
And
now
then
that-
any future ones.
You said right now that Longview has a portion of the park that's designated as off leash. Am I correct?
Correct.
Yeah, because I've heard about doggy parties up there before. Doggy parties with wine.
I don't know enough about all the different parks, but I was impressed with the comments that we got from the users, and especially the ones where they were concerned about little kids mixing in with dogs that weren't on leash. And whatever parks, if that was the Carriage Square, or whichever one it was, I really think we need to pay attention to that, because those are the users, those are the people that are going to be there every day, and they have a right to sort of set the rules for their local area that they're using. Although, as you said, Kurt, a generic leash law that would cover everything and then allow for exceptions on an individual basis also would work. But I just really feel that the people who are using it and being exposed to the jeopardies that they are
Sure.
deserve special attention.
Sure. So that example, Carriage Square Park, right now, dogs are not allowed.
Mm-hmm.
We do get frequent calls, from the neighbors. They are on it. There is a playground there. It is not fenced.
Yeah.
That's, I think, part of their concern.
I would agree that that's
But
one
we
that
also
we should
have a
put.
lot of other parks that have a similar situation. So my only concern, and I'm completely not opposed to that at all, is just where is it okay and where isn't? I just want to have some consistent rules if we can, so people aren't so confused. Because right now we have some parks where there's off leash and some where they're not, and people just don't know. It's very confusing. So what guidelines would we want?
Commissioner
to
Keeter
use?
has a suggestion.
Jennifer, what about those parks that have a playground that is fenced and separate from the rest of the park? Maybe we could allow dogs off leash in those parks. But I know like at Sunset Park, the playground is not fenced, and so I don't think it would be a good idea for the dogs to be off leash there, because that playground caters to the little guys, like 5 and under.
Right.
So maybe that could be one of the criteria, if the playground is fenced and separate from the park.
Okay.
Vice Chair has a comment.
Thank you. Sort of building off what Commissioner Kiever mentioned, and the chair, I definitely like the on leash in parks, especially with playgrounds. And I was trying to look up all the parks. I've only made it halfway through visiting all of our parks in Carson because we have a lot. I'm very excited about that. So parks maybe without playgrounds, where you're less likely to have those dog-child interactions. Maybe there's a question. Do we have fenced-in non-playground park spaces? Just green spaces?
Yes.
Do we?
Sports complexes.
Oh.
I didn't hear.
But I think those are explicitly, those are exempt already
Yeah.
under the first policy.
Well, at least from the staff perspective, I mean,
Right.
we're definitely open to discussing that. But right now, we don't allow dogs at our sports complexes and our sports fields for a reason. You have a lot of people actively playing in sports and the feces, and it also is just difficult on the turf and maintenance and a million other things, and especially user conflicts when we have sports, big tournaments, and even if you just go practice nights, I mean, it's just too much. The user conflicts are hard. So I think that's one that staff feels really strongly about, is the sports complexes and keeping those as no dog areas.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I didn't mean to say we should include those. But
Yeah.
I think we have some smaller park areas that maybe, there's one listed on the website, the Empire Ranch Estates Park, that I've not been to, and I don't know.
Oh, it's cute.
It's cute. Is there a playground?
No.
So maybe less likely to run into some kids and.
Treadwell behind the old hospital.
Oh. Well, that would be, I like the leashes, especially where there's kids.
To add on to that, like the only like park that is fully fenced is like Sonoma Park, and within that park we do have a playground, and that playground is currently fenced off from the other area. But that's truly the only park that is completely fenced at this time.
Scrap my fencing idea. Maybe just keep
Blackwell?
them away from busy roads.
Oh, it's only the back part.
So, yeah, this is.
I know. So what
Should
about
we-
what
should-
about trails? How do you guys feel about dogs on trails? I know we've heard a lot and we saw a lot in the survey. A lot of people are very passionate about wanting their dog, beyond the trailhead. I think we all had some consensus at the last joint meeting about dogs on leash at the trailhead, and the concept that the Forest Service and BLM have, where once you're off a certain distance, whatever that might be, you could let your dog off. Trailheads are a real source of concern. Usually near a street, there's cars backing in and out. Other dogs are getting out. They're just super excited. But a great place where you need to control your dog. Maybe they end up calming down. How do you feel about dogs off leash on trails, whether it's through our open space or, urban paved trails? Should there be a difference? Should there not be?
I think urban paved trails, dogs should be on leash. I think if it's paved. The regular trails, open space, I support they need to be on leash for the 200 feet and then be off leash. And I understand that there are people who walk their dogs who prefer to keep them on leash and don't appreciate the goofball dogs running up. And that is a dilemma. The flip side of that is there are folks with their dogs who run with their dogs, and the dogs are wanting to run, and it's just a nice way to go out and enjoy the trail, enjoy being outside, letting the dog run. And I'm a good runner, and I can't keep up with my dog. And while I don't run with Hank off leash on trails for other reasons, I think it's a reasonable expectation that people could let their animals off those trails that haven't been designated no dogs allowed, such as the Waterfall Trail. So I think it's also very reasonable that there are some trails that we do not allow because of watersheds and because of environmental reasons. Which then falls back to really being clear, and what we're doing here is sending clear information about what parks, what trails do allow dogs and which don't. I think we can over manage to where then it gets super complicated. And
Hard to enforce. Yeah.
as at the joint meeting, when Mark Kimbrough talked about how a small incident can really escalate into a problem that shouldn't become a problem. And then Jennifer, you so beautifully said you would rather talk to people about what they can do versus what they can't. I think it's super important that as we go through this, that we really keep in mind what is allowed versus what isn't. Final comment. When all of this is in place, it will become normalized. You know, at first there will be pushback if there's change, but after it starts working, and then after people really can know that if they go to Sonoma Park or Fuji or the future dog parks that potentially are in the works, that's that opportunity to let your dog run around and play with other dogs, and you can visit while your dogs are playing. And then the other ones, that there is the expectation that these dogs are on leash, and that's okay as well. Or perhaps Sunset Park, that they're not allowed at all.
Building on Commissioner Schuette's comments, I think as we go forward, we are going to need to keep the public educated about what we're doing and why. Make it seem it's not arbitrary. Here's why we're not letting the dogs here. It's for the quality of the water. We're not letting the dogs here because of the nesting season or whatever it is. If we can get people to buy into why we're doing it, I think there would be, the acceptance would be faster than if we just said, you're going to do it and you're going to do it our way. Just a thought. And also, I would like to keep CK's comments earlier about the Bailey Pond into our discussion as well. So if we could take those into consideration, that would be appreciated.
And I'm capturing all your comments. I took really good notes last night, and so did Lindsay at Open Space, so we can kind of combine your comments and try to find some, bullet points when we have some consensus between the two boards for further discussion too.
And I agree with Commissioner Schuette as far as I expect to run with my dog off leash on trails. And that's just what we do, and I will respect the fact that when we get there, we'll put a leash on and so forth. And after that, we're going to go up and he's going to explore and I'm going to do my thing. So that's why I live here and I love doing that. And I know that there's a lot of people that love it as much as I do. So, and my wife. So.
Do you have any comments on the urban trails?
I agree with her on that too, as far as the urban paved trails, that those are probably more frequented by families and so forth and so on. And if they're going to, I think there should be a leash on those.
There were some concerns because there's lots of, street crossings, like you could do the linear ditch trail, or there's busy streets, those type of urban conflicts were a bigger concern.
Would you consider Riverview Park an urban?
If you say paved trails, then I would say no.
See, that's where I was going with that. That's a park.
But I think
it's a
it
designated
depends
park.
on the direction of the river corridor, how we go there. There is some nesting habitat. I would be more concerned about the wildlife conflicts at that particular location.
And different
But it's so
seasons.
busy. It's just such a busy
Yeah,
location.
and people are definitely used to getting them to the trailhead, through the gate, off they go, and
Right.
so.
Absolutely. There was some general comment about trying to keep whatever we do simple, and maybe it's not about surface type. Maybe there's like a geographic area, your dogs are, are in leash, and then, maybe beyond, and then the open space areas. But there was comments, I know, member Inverson last night said, well, it's not really about surface type, it's really about the width of the trail. And if it makes sense to have your dog off leash, where, if you're on a single track and then you have more issues not being able to yield to other people because you have a dog, you have a bike coming at you, maybe that's not practical, but maybe the wider trails, it makes more sense. So there was a conversation about that. We never really, I think, got consensus. It ends up, you go down these rabbit holes for sure.
Jen,
Yes.
I just had a comment on that. I've recently been biking some of the paved trails, and I think there's, I can envision a safety issue with dogs off leash. Both for the dog and the biker. You always yield, but when when you are approaching someone with the dog and it's off leash, you wonder, is this a chaser or is it really under control? You really don't know. Not sure. Just another factor I think we should consider, particularly on paved trails.
So it looks like a lot of the commission is agreeable to the paved trails and as you would describe, an urban trail to have. The V&T, paved V&T up there, the new trail over there off of Buzzy Ranch Road, all those types of things. I envision those people having their dogs on a leash is what I'm hearing from everybody to put in your notes.
So I think,
Not that that's
we need to probably define what that is.
Yeah,
and,
but
and maybe look at a
as
map.
we're spitballing through this, that
Sure.
it all makes sense to us, and also things like the Kings Canyon area that we don't want the waterfall area. So
That's, a good segue into, I think we'll skip number 5 if you don't mind, because open space really dove into that last night about environmentally sensitive areas. Definitely their bailiwick, but if we could talk about number 6, which is dogs are prohibited except service animals at the following locations. And so we put in here, the 3 cemeteries that we operate and maintain. And staff feels very strongly about that, just from, a historic and cultural sense, keeping that way. But what else? We've talked about the waterfall trail potentially being an area where we might want to consider prohibiting them. I think with the new trailhead that's going in, there will be options. So should we go that direction where we prohibit dogs on the waterfall trail, they'll still be able to go up the road from that trailhead and have another option.
yes,
So maybe it's like, if you have a dog, go this way. If you don't, or something.
big
And
flashing
we can tell
sign.
people
Dogs,
where
no dogs.
that's a great opportunity of, like Lisa said, tell them where they can go. But are there other areas where we think
Well, I know
dogs should be
it's
prohibited?
probably redundant, but you want to make sure you put in there those governors and Edmonds.
Okay, yeah, we can refer back to that.
The sports fields, I mean.
Yeah, that list
because they both
under
have,
number 3.
Yeah, they both have park structures in them and so forth, so people will have to
Under
understand
number
it.
3, does that list look good to you guys? Are we missing locations? I guess 6 and 3 are repeat, so I apologize for that. But so we've already
are they
identified
allowed?
at Centennial. We do have a trail system at the top that we probably want to.
So they're not allowed in the sports facility at Centennial.
Correct.
So can we generically say sports facilities?
Yes.
Youth and
just
adult
knowing we have the
sports
golf
facility.
course there as well.
Yeah, youth and adult sports facilities are not allowed dogs. Vice Chair has more to say. Go for it.
Thank you. So under number 6, maybe self-explanatory, but should we specify that dogs are not allowed on any playground equipment or in those like the little area where the playground equipment is located?
So any playgrounds.
Yeah, like don't
Okay.
let your dog on the slide, Do they?
And you see it.
The vice chair brings up a great point. Like, I know at some of the playgrounds, they'll say, don't bring your dog in here, and people go, that doesn't apply to me. And they bring them in, and their dogs do their business. They don't clean up after them, it's just. So I think that brings again into play the education component. How do we educate people that there's a reason their dogs aren't allowed in the playgrounds, or they're not allowed in the cemeteries or whatever? And I'm not sure how to get that information out there.
We've done some outreach and education campaigns. The rangers have been really great. Dog park etiquette. We had one of our AmeriCorps put that great dog poop video cartoon that was so funny, but it was really informative and about how feces, contaminate the water system and the watershed. But it had some humor with it. But it taught you about, oh, you know what? I don't want to make them, let them do that. So I think we can continue on that. And I think our stance as a department is education over enforcement, overall anything. And when we met with the Humane Society, they agreed with that approach. That's what they want to do. They don't want to cite people, and we don't want that either. We just want people to go to our parks, feel safe, and enjoy themselves. It's really that simple. But how can we make sure that that happens? And we need to give some guidance so they have an informed decision. I know if I go to that park, you know what? There's not going to be a dog, or if there's going to be dogs, they're going to be on a leash. So if I have an issue with dogs, I know I can make an informed decision and go to that park. So I just want people to know, kind of what the guidance is going to be.
Jen, can I just, is it all right if I add on to that?
Oh,
Jen?
yeah.
So currently, when our park rangers do make contact with individuals who might have their pets in like the wrong places, obviously that they approach them and they explain to them, but they also have the brochures that we have made that have the locations of parks throughout the city that are dog friendly. So, they do hand those out quite frequently, but I think, whatever becomes of this policy is going to have to be a pretty good campaign on our end to educate the public and the users, and it's gonna be challenging, and it's probably gonna be frustrating, but I think that's a course of action that we are already anticipating on our end and trying to figure out ways to get the word out when this comes.
I have an idea. Building on what you were saying about a campaign, and I think here is an opportunity to collaborate with Nevada Humane Society, but it's also an opportunity to collaborate with some of the people who submitted opinions. Perhaps in a campaign, team up with someone who is opposed to dogs in parks and let them speak on behalf of Sunset Park or some of the other parks and the whys behind it. And they can even be holding their dog and just say, I love my dog and I am super happy. And my dog's really happy when we go to Sonoma Park or something else. But this park is no dogs because. And so really build a collaboration with different members of the community. So it's not just Parks and Rec, not just NHS, not just nonprofits, but also just community members sharing their thoughts. And that might help create a better buy-in. And then especially with the waterfall trail and really speaking to where our water comes from. I mean, that could really tie in with the wastewater and all of that, just to say, hey, and you could have fun with that, I think.
Maybe we can get Jason from the DA's department. He did a fantastic job on that video.
Yeah.
Some fantastic acting skills, so
We'll sign him and his mullet up.
see if he has a dog.
So what other areas that you would like us to do further research on? One, I had hoped to do some more kind of digging on our parks that are also detention basins. So Mayor's Park, Blackwell's Park, Schultz Ranch Park. That water in a flood situation or heavy rains, is designed to hold and retain that water. But then where does it go? Where's that stormwater runoff? Is that going into our drinking water system? So I wanted to check with the health department and get their opinion about those specific locations, to see if there's any health concerns about, just allowing dogs. Those are really popular with dog users. They are. I just want to make sure that we're considering all of our health component as well. So I'm going to do some research on that, and I'll report back to you next time on that. Is there any other areas, and we're going to collaborate with the Department of Wildlife? As I said, Lindsay's going to reach out, and we're going to talk about the nesting habitat and the sensitive areas and the wildlife conflicts. But is there anything else that you'd like us to do some more research on and report back to you?
Department of Conservation to weigh in on the quality of water, and maybe they have some materials that we would find beneficial when we're telling people we don't want your dogs up at Waterfall because, they're a big agency. They're in charge of water quality in the state. They might be able to provide a little assistance.
We also have the Carson Water Sub-Conservancy, and they're one of our tremendous partners, and Lindsay's working with them on numerous projects, so we can reach out to them as well.
I think.
Jen?
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just add this. I don't really want to add to your workload, but I have to confess I didn't read through the 400 and some odd comments that were there. And I really didn't read it in enough detail, those comments anyway, to see if we could categorize. I mean, are there some common themes there that we could kind of turn that into some kind of summary? I know you already have the survey, but would it be worthwhile to try to categorize those and see what the most prevalent themes are, some kind of Pareto or something?
Yeah, and I think we took an initial stab at that. So that's some of the policy statements that you have in the attachment 1. We tried to take some of those concepts that we saw, those themes that in the survey we saw coming up, dogs on leash except designated areas. What are the, and some of those, but I think we could probably do that further looking at that. I think that's a good suggestion. How do you guys feel about Long Ranch and Mills Park, given the creeks going through there? Is that something you want us to research more with water quality issues before, so you can make a better informed decision?
Yeah, that'd be great. But there's not usually water running
Correct.
through Mills Park or Long Ranch. In the spring, maybe we can call that the nesting season. There is. I mean, and what does the fertilizer have to do with getting into that water that we're using on the grass, and how is it different? I mean, so not there's another, the goose poop, the fertilizer that we're using, the dog poo. I mean, it's all bad for the water. Is the dog poo negligible? Is the dog urine negligible? That's rhetorical, by the way. So.
I think another thing that I wanted to talk about too is, from my perspective and reading the survey, I think we need more fenced, designated dog parks in the community, and what would be, potentially good locations for those to go. There are a lot of people that are mobility challenged or can't go down into open space and let their dogs run, and they need the more urban opportunities for that. I will let you know, I think we've talked about it before, but Lampa East, that development that will be going in right across the street from the Humane Society location, we have in their conditions of approval that they will build a 3-acre dog park. So that is one location that we'll be able to have. So that's on the east side. We have Fuji Dog Park. We have Sonoma. Would Long Ranch be a location that we would want? Maybe a fenced dog park? Would that work? I think the people that are there really enjoy and love that.
I
But we do
agree.
get a lot of complaints about that same location as well. I think there's a lot of conflicting perspectives. Where else might be?
Well, before you said detention, I was thinking of Mayor's Park because of just the setting and how well it would work. But that'd be a question, like you said, for the health department. So
Jen?
Yeah.
Do we have any plans to build north of town, like say up by Air?
Well, I think the staff has a real desire to kind of reimagine Centennial Park and update the master plan there. That could be an opportunity. This fall, we're going to be updating the master plan at Mills Park. I don't know if we want to consider a potential component, given all the dog conflicts we have there now, and it's a prohibited park. Remember, we had 180 contacts related to dogs in a 3-month period at Mills, and no dogs are allowed there. Clearly, it's an issue. Maybe we consider a fenced off-leash area there. I wouldn't want something that's not fenced because it's so close to Highway 50, but maybe that's something we look at when we're updating the master plan as a potential amenity that should be considered.
right there off a silly loop that, we'd call it the northeast corner.
I just know there are a lot of people who go to Sonoma who come from Arrowhead and Gonai and such, and they've expressed an interest in having a park. And I know years ago when we did a big tour of potential park spots, there was some land on Arrowhead, but it bordered on land with cinder lights, so that's why we
Yeah,
discarded.
it's so that's identified in the lands bill, and I'll give you an update on that under my director's report. But it's a buffer to the airport, so the airport has desired that as an emergency landing area. So it wouldn't probably be an ideal location for us to do any improvements, just to the proximity of the airport. But I think looking at that, maybe next time we can come back with a map or something and looking at it geographically, where maybe we provide those urban dog park opportunities, north, south, east, and west, and we look at trying to provide some options for people. It doesn't take long to drive across town,
No,
honestly.
it doesn't.
But if there's some that make sense or areas that are a current problem and we can mitigate that problem, maybe through some simple improvements, I think it's worth discussing.
I
Jen?
agree 100%. And, especially Centennial Park, there's land available for that. And there's definitely, people appreciate the opportunity to take their dogs to run freely in a safe enclosed area. I lost my train of thought.
I have a quick comment.
Go ahead, Dave. And we'll get
Thank you. Just building on Jen's comment about the number of contacts that we have in Mills Park, and thinking about how we use our data, the fact that seems to be the most, the highest number of contacts occurs in Mills Park, the data might be trying to tell us something. I mean, people either think or want to use that park for dogs, so maybe a designated area is is something we should consider there. That's my comment.
Oh, Jen, they like those parks and they're willing to make the trip in for their dogs. And to come down, there's one couple that comes down daily from Lake Tahoe with their dogs to Fuji. So I just think that speaks to the caliber of the parks that we're providing, that people from outside the areas want to come use them.
We have a lot. Is there anything else you want us to research? And so I think if it's okay with you, we could just keep this as a standing item and we'll continue the discussion and try to, just chip away at it as we can go and as we get more research from experts in certain areas. That way we can continue the discussion at the next meeting and then we'll be a little more prepared when we have the joint meeting with open space in December. So we can keep kind of the conversation going and then we'll try to do some more policy statements for you guys to look at and locations and try to hone in on that.
Last meeting, we kind of had commitments from two of the commission members on a subtype committee. Are you guys still willing to do that? So maybe Jen, before we go, after you get some of those reports back from NDOW and Health Department and things like that, the Water Subconservancy and all that, you can share that with Commissioner Kiever.
For this committee, it was Commissioner Kiever and
Commissioner Lisa,
Commissioner
yeah.
Sudi. Okay.
And you could share that with them, and maybe you guys could collaborate and get some bullet points and feel good about them to come back. And I think it would probably streamline the process in the next meeting. So, and of course, if you needed help from anybody here, I'm sure they'd help you also. So
That would be great. Yeah.
does that sound like a plan, ladies?
And Mark Kimbrough has been great from Open Space, and I do want to thank him again. He's really passionate about that, and he used to be the staff person and work with these things, so he understands the challenges that go with it. And I think the real sentiment last night was try to keep it as simple as possible, so people are not confused, and it's just easy for people to understand and easy for the staff to explain to people.
And is there a delineation that has to be made as far as open space and parks, or you think we'll be able to come to a conclusion?
I think we will, and honestly, I don't think people know if they're in open space or know if they're in a park, and does it matter? I mean,
Okay.
I think they just need to know where they can have their dog off a leash or not. I mean, I think it's maybe a little bit more simple. But
Or have their dog or not?
But we do really have, on the open space committee, we have some really amazing technical experts that can really help us with those like environmental sensitivity issues and kind of help with that guidance. And I think we'll look to them at that. But they also, kind of oversee that Prison Hill OHV area. Should we have dogs where there's ATV? I mean, I don't know. But there's dogs out there every day right now. I mean, our trails coordinator said people go out and, you talk about riding a bike with your dog next to you. Well, they're riding their ATV or they're side by side with a dog running next to them. And they do it and it's fine. So,
Neighborhood that does that.
yeah, I mean, I think it's a real thing. So,
Well, I think hashing this out and, as you saying, throwing spitballing it.
Spitballing.
It really, though, brings to light how complicated this is and the overlap, whether it's open space or parks, and then which parks in a family park and on leash or not at all. And so I think anybody watching this can really see how complicated it is, and it isn't an easy answer. And whatever is decided is going to be well thought out, and while probably not perfect, I think it's going to really help alleviate some of the confusion.
Okay, so have we talked about dogs enough this evening? Those wonderful little people. All right, so then we're going to move on to staff update for discussion only, and Jennifer is still on the mic.
sorry, I didn't mean to make it the Jen show. Probably sick of me, so I will try to keep it brief. I do have a legislative update. I'm so excited. So I just found out today that they did, Congressman Amade on Friday introduced our lands bill. So we had already had introductions from Senator Cortez Masto and Rosen, and we were waiting, on the other side. So that is really exciting. I don't have any idea of time frame or if it's going to committees. I did ask our deputy city manager to find out just some more information so we could get information out to you. When's the time where we start emailing, congressmen and emailing support? And I'm going to find that out, and we'll get that information to you all. But I'm pretty excited that it's moving forward. So that's a really big deal. And as soon as I have updates, I'll make sure I email all of you on that. So I gave you a couple late material handouts. Some exciting stuff. Let's start with the one with the yellow. This is the American Rescue Plan. So this is some of the federal dollars that are coming to Carson City. The Board of Supervisors at their last meeting approved this conceptual plan of expenditures. It's a little bit vague for a reason. You know, these aren't hard quotes for projects, but just sort of placeholders for projects they're supportive of and identifying some funding. The items in yellow are the ones identified to support parks. I'm going to start with number 4, and we're going to go backwards. But item number 4 is investment in outdoor spaces. They identified another $330,000. You'll remember in our capital improvement budget, we had $330,000 for 4 courts at Centennial. This is the other 4 courts at Centennial. So we'll be able to replace all 8 courts at Centennial, which is amazing. There's also funding identified for pickleball courts at Mills Park. So we'll try to incorporate that as we update the master plan. Dave's given a big thumbs up at home. And then restrooms at various park sites, which is wonderful. So the tennis courts at Centennial, the restrooms there are really old. It's a great opportunity to just replace that as well at Centennial Park. There's a lot of other restrooms that really need that reinvestment. And then if you go back up to item 2G, it says $175,000. $75,000 of that is identified for maintenance of those new restroom facilities. So we could contract that out. We could hire people, however we need to do that. But just to help offset, that is a limited funding. It has, it's probably only for 3 years because of the restrictions on the federal funding, but at least give us some help while we work through our inmate situation and we work through our employee shortages. So we're able to contract out some help. So that's just really exciting, and we really appreciate the board's, support in helping fund additional park improvements. And then this other.
I have
go ahead.
I want to dwell on restrooms for a minute. The ones at Mills and at Roscold get closed during the winter time. Because of why? I guess something to do with the pipes and freezing and stuff.
So the one at Roscold, we just rehabilitated and we'll be able to keep it open during the winter.
Okay.
Well, if we had people to clean it right now.
Okay, good.
Right now it's a different challenge, but we did update that with the community development block grant so we can
Okay.
keep it. It has a heated chase and the equipment so the pipes won't freeze. Mills Park isn't that way, but if we update these restrooms, we'll be able to
That's
change
part
it.
of the updating?
Part of the update. We would completely replace.
Okay.
We're not going to do a facelift at the ones at Mills Park. I mean, they're old and they need to be completely replaced.
No, it's just that, the porta potties that they have are not tended to like they ought to be sometimes. So it's better if there's a way to upgrade them and fix it.
Yeah.
That'd be terrific. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
That's great. Good questions. And then this other handout is just an overview of, these are all the CIP that you guys recommended as part of your recommended budget to the Board of Supervisors. We're just into our new fiscal year. So I just wanted to give you a recap of all that was included. And you'll see a lot of that equipment, well, it doesn't sound exciting. It's just so essential to our maintenance staff that we have new mowers and new tractors and new equipment to be able to maintain our parks. And a lot of that is funded through the Quality of Life Fund, which is great. So, I mean, this document represents more than $3 million of capital improvements into our park system. Plus the other 3 we just talked about, we're really investing and reinvesting in the park system. So you're going to start to see a lot of improvements over the next couple of years, which is great. Yes.
Regarding the tennis courts, I know initially, before this other money became available, there was talk about applying for a grant.
Yes.
Is that still in the works, or is it still a possibility?
We were looking at land and water conservation funds,
Right.
which is a 1-to-1 match. So for every dollar you request, you have to put in $1. But they weren't accepting any applications this round,
Okay.
this year. So that's why this other federal funding is a great alternative for us.
Perfect, thanks.
We could always pursue that, but the project would be put off another year, and then it's typically about 18 months after you submit your grant, if it's accepted, to actually get authorization for the money. So it would really put it off for multiple years.
Okay, thanks.
And the other late material that I provided is just an updated organizational chart for all of you. And we get a lot of questions about certain things, so I wanted to make sure we put some things that some of the staff oversee. So if you have a question about trees, Jared Whitaker is a great person. He's our certified arborist. If you have questions about Bee City stuff, Lindsay Boyer's your contact. You know, just trying to help you find the right person for what you're looking for if you have questions. And just an updated organizational chart. We're really excited that we actually have all full-time staff in park maintenance. Those are all filled. We really need seasonal staff. We have a pretty significant seasonal employee shortage right now across the entire department, not only in park maintenance, but in our recreation division. We need staff at our, before and after school programs. We need lifeguards. We only are at about 50% of our lifeguards that we actually need. This is a nationwide problem. It's not only Carson City, but it is a real struggle. So if you talk to people, I'm just going to keep pleading and encouraging people to apply. These are really fun jobs, great entry-level jobs too, to learn, good work ethics and get outside and have a good time and engage with people. So it's a great place to work, and we have a lot of job opportunities as well. But that's, I think that's everything. Oh, we are going to have our board development workshop. I just want to remind all of you, it'll be September 7th. It'll likely be an all-day thing, probably 9 to 4. We are going to likely do a little interpretive hike with the rangers. We will feed you, make sure it's fun and lighthearted and not all business and sitting down. But if there's anything specific that you want us to incorporate in the agenda, we're working right now on that. Michael Saloga, that works over at the Senior Center, is going to be our facilitator and help us through the whole day. But if there's anything specific, one thing we heard from Open Space last night was a discussion on what open space and parks, could help the staff with to offset some things, and then what do we need from you guys? So a discussion at that day about how we can better kind of help each other was one idea last night. Alan Welsh, the chair of Open Space, brought that up. But if there's other things that you think of, it doesn't have to be tonight. Reach out to me afterward or in the next few weeks, or you can always talk to Lindsay Boyer too. She's helping put that together. But anything you guys would like to see discussed, how we can better collaborate, what do we want at joint meetings? Are there other types of presentations or information you would like to see? Just let us know.
So is that going to be like in a van tour type thing, or
We'll
just?
probably start off-site, and then the rest of the day will be here.
Okay.
And we'll have probably some breakout rooms. We reserved, I think, this room in the morning, and then we reserved the Bonanza room and maybe one of the other rooms as well, so we can break out.
Okay. I was just thinking about the whole dog issue and going through the dog issue, and if there was any specific things that we could
Look at.
look at, kick the dirt, visualize, since that's on everybody's radar.
Sure.
Yeah. No, yeah.
Well, maybe our
Just an
hike
idea.
with the Rangers could be at a location that we might be able to
And
talk
yeah,
about
you could
that too.
explain how you would transition between the leashes and the non-leashes. How would things like that. Just maybe part of the discussion, so we'd all visualize kind of what was going on with that.
Sure.
So, just
Great.
an idea.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That's all I have. No. We are not an active shelter for livestock right now at Fuji. What other areas do is they go through our emergency manager, so the fire department, and to make that request. but we have to have somebody be able to take intake of those animals and make sure they're fed and watered and monitored, because we don't want any animals to get out, get stolen. It is something that requires some labor. We're not able to provide that labor piece. We can definitely provide the facility if it's ever needed. We're happy to do so. And then in the past, we have like CERT, the citizen, I don't know what that all stands for, but it's the citizen volunteers that work with the sheriffs and fire department. They're really helpful. Sometimes the Red Cross will monitor it. Sometimes the Humane Society will help where needed. But we've struggled getting that piece because they're actually deployed at helping other fires, a lot of those volunteer resources. But we were for a brief time providing that, and then we'll continue to provide that when that's requested, through the fire
So the
department.
owners wouldn't be able to stand in and help with the animals. We need somebody from the city to oversee that.
Well, no, it doesn't have to be someone from the city. It just has to be, it can be a volunteer, it can be a volunteer organization. Like I said, the Red Cross has provided that. The CERT volunteers are not city employees. They're all volunteers. We just have to have, someone on site to help make sure that those animals are fed, watered, and, and safe.
Okay. And then for Sonoma, there's been a lot of interest in when the playground will reopen. It was vandalized, as people may not know, and we're waiting for replacement parts, correct?
We are, and I think it's a good 6 to 8 weeks out. Dave can correct me, before we get those parts. It just takes a lot of time, and right now, a lot of deliveries and parts are just across the board with anything that you need right now. It's just difficult to come by. We do have signage up. We have had our signs ripped down repeatedly that people are jumping the fence and using the playground anyway. It's not safe to do so. So if you see people using the playground when it's closed and signed, it's not just the slide. We have a couple pieces of broken equipment, but we want to make sure people are safe and don't get hurt, and we do intend to fix it. Just takes time to get those parts.
Well, I know the regulars are self-policing, if you will, and they will tell people you can't be in there because of the and generally the people on the playground have 2 words, and they're not happy birthday.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think, to tell people where they can go, we have a lot of really wonderful playgrounds at
Exactly.
other parks as well, and it's a great time to check those out. We just did a lot of improvements at John Mankins Park. We have a brand new playground at Roscold, at Schultz Ranch. I mean, there's some really great play structures that are brand new. They're ADA accessible, and it's a good time to go check out some other locations.
I'll let the regulars know that that would be a good thing for them to
Yeah.
do, because they're not above wading in and having words with people in the playground, which,
And they're really not that far. I mean, Schultz Ranch isn't that far. I mean, from that location, it's really just down the street. So that'd be a great alternative.
and then as I told you, there is a leak under the dog water fountain, and it looks like it's getting pretty bad, so.
We will make sure that gets addressed.
Okay, yeah, I have visions of that plat.
Yeah, I told Dave you're going to show him your photos.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, the interesting thing, I'll just comment on that real quick. Usually this time of year, that starts to become a problem. And the main reason why is because those drinking fountains are on top of, sumps. They're not connected to the sewer system. So it's just a big, sump, it's not a hole, but there's a bunch of rock in there, and it's only so big. It can only take so much water at a certain time, and it doesn't drain at a very fast rate. So, people are always filling up that bowl, and it continues to drain. I sat there one time and watched different people come up and get water for their dog, and then that water drains out, and it was probably 15 to 20 gallons at a time, and that sump's not that big. So when it gets used a lot, which is usually this time of year,
Right,
that's when we
plus,
start seeing it more.
They now have wading pools. People have started bringing wading pools for the dogs, and I know they empty them over, and
Yeah.
that's a lot of water too.
Yep, yes, that is a
Anyway,
lot
I
of water. as well.
appreciate that.
Okay, yeah, sure, not a problem.
The status of the repairs at Roscold Tennis Courts, is the contract been let, and will that be done before winter?
I believe it's about to go out to bid if it's not out already. But I think I'll have to confirm, and I'll get back to you on the
Okay.
dates. I don't know the exact dates.
Okay.
But I think with the post-tension concrete, it's something that would have to be done in spring because it needs temperatures, I believe. It has like a coating. But let me get back to you on that. Don't quote me on
Okay.
it. But we do have the funding. The plans are all done. You know, it is kind of ready to go.
Right, okay, thank you.
Is that right?
Uh,
Okay.
Yes, Jen, that's,
Okay.
that is, is he correct? We have all the documents like to go out. What we're running into now is just like a time frame. We've already heard back from from a couple of people who are interested in the project and want to bid on it. And their concern is that there's a time period that the concrete has to cure before they can come in and put their acrylic like paint on it. And so we're working with that now. That they are suggesting to us right now that it's probably better in the spring. So that's what we're looking at right now. We still might put it out to bid, but then we'll just have to work with the contractor possibly on the construction dates on that. So, okay.
City Parks? No? Okay. Well, great. Is there any future agenda items that anybody here would like to hear? Yes.
I know I was out for a little bit. Did we ever get a memorial policy in place, or is that something we could revisit?
We can definitely revisit. I think we're probably at about 90%
Okay.
on that, and we can finish cleaning that up. I think the only remaining items were scattering of ashes that we had to kind of further refine, and maybe one other item that I can't think of right now, but we'll bring that back. And then it should be about ready to go. We could probably bring it back in December, so that way open space can see it as well, and then that way it can go right to the Board of Supervisors.
So
after
that'll be
that.
an action item?
Yes.
Great,
Thank you.
great. Anybody
And
else have
I
any?
think we'll have a golf presentation in October, if that still works. That's typically the time when they come once a year.
Okay.
That still works for you guys.
Does anybody else have anything for upcoming meetings? Okay, so the next thing on the agenda here is the ending public comments, and I see that we've raised some questions in you. So CK, you go right ahead.
Thank you so kindly, Commissioner, Chairman. I want to thank Benjamin, who did a yeoman's job, and of course, Jen over there, just awesome. And of course, my favorite, Leanne, she knows I'm hopelessly in her back pocket. So I did want to bring up just a couple of dabs. How do we bring out the word on our parks to those who work on the north side of town, who never make it to the south side of town, where the south side parks are? And conversely, folks that work on the south side don't know what's going on the north side. It's kind of a funny thing, but I've been noticing it. I know that Parks is putting out a lot of work, and I just wanted to kind of underscore that just a little bit, that's what I've been noticing out there. When we talk about dogs, and here I'm going back to dogs, and trails, when you have NDOW come in, please ask them about rattlesnake training for dogs. Okay, this is one of the things that seems to it used to be a really big deal, and it was, training was given by NDOW, and they had experts doing it, but nothing is worse than to lose your friend to a rattlesnake. And I don't care what trail you are in northern Nevada, there's rattlesnakes. So I don't care if it's a signage thing, it could be something as easy as that, or something that's brought to the attention from Parks and Rec with the help of NDOW. That's a biggie. People running with leash with a dog, I find no problem. I see them all the time at Carriage Square. These folks really, they run. I don't know how their hearts are going to do in 102-degree weather with smoke clogging their lungs, but it seems that leash dogs run very well. Anyway, I am on board with leash log clarity. I'm very much on that. I like that idea of perhaps splitting a park into leashed and unleashed. It's a thought. It's a thought that could be given. Also, I don't know how much thought, speaking of John, is it Macon Park on the north side? There's a huge thing going on the northwestern corner of Carson City, just below the hospital. There's a lot of homes being built there, and I'm not sure if there was anything. I think there's, for so many homes, there has to be a park. I don't know or how many people. I'm not sure of that, but that is an opportunity. There's still land up there, so that might be an opportunity for another park. Yes, the northwest corner of the golf course. I don't know if it might be an opportunity. I don't know. But thank you so much for hearing me out. And this was a great meeting. Appreciate it.
Thank you, CK. So with that,
We do have one caller on the line.
Oh, great. We would love to hear from them. Go ahead, caller.
Caller, when you hear the two beeps, it'll be your turn for public comment. Please state your name for the record.
Hi there, Robin Orloff here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Glad to be part of this. Great meeting by everyone. I listened last night. I'm going to be talking about the dog issue. Appreciated open spaces input and your input as well. I'm totally on board with leash laws in certain situations. Of course, I agree with pavement downtown, special natural resource protection, the waterfall trail. And thank you, Mr. Bailey. I love Bailey Pond. On your suggestion, I went and revisited it. It's quite a special ecosystem, especially on a hot afternoon. Totally agree. I don't think dogs should be there either. But I hope you'll appreciate me as a constituent. I'm a long-distance trail runner. I know Lisa Schutte and Kurt Meyer talked about that. My dogs are athletic dogs. I usually rescue the bird dogs. They love to run. Most of the time I can keep up with them, but I do like to let them off leash. We go out for hours, and I would appreciate being considered. There's a very active group of people here in Carson City that have moved here for trail running, mountain biking, and we absolutely love the open space. And I think some of this was mentioned too, that an opportunity to allow the dog off leash responsibly. I totally agree with not letting them off leash for 200 or 300 feet and respecting other people that are on the trail and bicyclists. But I hope you will consider our subset as a constituency for off leash running. And I think that covers most of it. I appreciate the discussion, and thank you all for being there.
Thank you very much. Are there any other callers that are sneaking in on us?
There are no other callers at this time.
I'm sorry, I forgot about that. Yeah. Is Stacy up there? Yes. Stacy, can you hear me? We can't hear you. Okay, we'll consider this a technical glitch, and she'll have to give us 2 reports next time she's here. She's in the deficit of 1 report. All right. So with that, do I have a motion for adjournment? So we got, and look at, here we go. So everybody in favor, I'm sorry. Aye. All right. I forgot that part. All right. Thanks everybody for coming out.